Hi everybody, this is Dino Chris from Prehistoric Facts, and this is a special episode today. We're actually going to talk about one of the newest dinosaurs that has been discovered recently, and that is Dreadnoughtus. And many of you know about this in the news, that you actually probably heard that Dreadnoughtus is probably the biggest dinosaur that has ever been found. Well, that's not really true. You see, we really don't know which dinosaur is the biggest dinosaur of all time, and that's really just up for debate right now. But anyway, Dreadnoughtus is basically found in Argentina in South America, late Cretaceous, around 77 million years ago. That's a lot. That's kind of pretty far for. That's kind of pretty long time. Pretty good time difference from the other titanosaurs. About 85 feet long, approximately 60 tons approximately, and it's a plant eater, and of course everybody knows that it's a sauropod, or a long-necked dinosaur. And Dreadnoughtus actually belongs to a group of sauropods called titanosaurs, and the titanosaurs were dominant in the early Cretaceous and the mid-Cretaceous, but they were slowly dying out during the late Cretaceous. But basically they were kind of actually making a comeback during the late Cretaceous. But basically the titanosaurs were actually were more likely roaming around, like in South America, Africa, and some parts of India and Asia. But basically the titanosaurs didn't really get quite to North America until probably the late Cretaceous, and also the titanosaurs were actually the largest animals to have ever existed on land, and so that's an amazing thing about these dinosaurs. Now, when this dinosaur was actually discovered and basically was put out into the press to say that this is one of the largest dinosaurs that has ever existed. Now, what the press does is basically they take things out of context. What they do is basically they hear biggest dinosaur and they go, oh, it's the biggest dinosaur of all time, let's actually put it on there. But basically that's not really true. So that's just actually taking what a paleontologist actually said and actually just turn it in a different direction. And so that's how it actually goes. Is basically the press actually kind of likes to turn things around, and basically the scientists are not very happy about that, and they actually want the press to actually say that what we found is actually one of the largest dinosaurs that has actually roamed the earth. It's not the biggest, So, Dreadnoughtus is basically not the biggest, and considering that Argentinosaurus is considered to be bigger than Dreadnoughtus, and Dreadnoughtus is kind of a medium-sized titanosaur. And when you actually kind of look at the body proportions compared to Argentinosaurus, which actually was roaming around Argentina around 110 to 100 million years ago, and so that pretty much kind of actually sees the whole difference between these two animals. And these two animals may look similar, because since they're actually part of the same family group, but when you actually look at them, they're very different in terms of size, and also in terms of how they might have actually have behaved. They may have behaved very similarly, but probably considering that Dreadnoughtus was probably hunted a lot more than Argentinosaurus, and so Argentinosaurus would have actually not have to worry about predation that much, considering that they do get pretty big, and Argentinosaurus is the heaviest dinosaur that has ever lived. But there's still a lot of debate on whether or not which titanosaur was actually the biggest and the heaviest sauropod that has ever lived. And I would actually say that Dreadnoughtus, not the biggest. It's not the biggest. It could be one of the heaviest, but not the biggest. And it's usually up for debate on whether or not what we actually call big. What do we call big for height, or for muscle mass. And you see, the elephant is actually the biggest animal in terms of mass. But when we actually talk about the giraffe is actually the tallest animal on Earth right now. And that's why you actually see why people would get confused of height and muscle mass. And so that's how it actually is going to be kind of considered that. But Dreadnoughtus would actually avoid predation just basically by being its size. Its size would be its #1 defensive weapon. And then its secondary defensive weapon would actually be its tail. The tail is actually going to have to swat the predators to kind of actually give it a distraction. And so that's really how it actually is going to That's really how it's actually going to go, if that actually happens. But the juveniles and probably the old and the sick are probably the oldest and the sickest animals would probably be in danger of predation, and so that's probably how it's actually going to be. Now, in terms of what kind of predators were actually around, it would actually be the Abylosaurs. The Abylosaurs were actually the top predators during that time. So you might actually see Carnotaurus actually come into picture in this, but it probably would have not actually taken on a really large Dreadnoughtus compared to, like, say, like a Saltosaur. A Saltosaur is a type of Titanosaur, but it's small in comparison to Dreadnoughtus, like Saltosaurus, for example. Saltosaurus is actually from South America as well. But also, since that Saltosaurus and Dreadnoughtus are actually kind of almost living in the same time, maybe that Saltosaurus was actually more common than Dreadnoughtus, and so it could actually be like, it's probably kind of like a differences in terms of antelope or deer, because sometimes when you actually look at like say if you were looking at a mule deer compared to a white-tailed deer, what we actually see here is that they're built very similarly, but when we actually look at them in terms of their skeletal structure, in terms of anatomy and all that, they're very different. And also their behaviors are very different as well. Mule deer are bigger than white-tailed deer, but they're slower than the white-tailed deer because they actually have more muscle mass. Whereas the white-tailed deer, they're a lot more common, and you actually see them roaming around in North America everywhere, and they're faster. So they're actually a very agile type of deer. But when it compares to Saltosaurus and Dreadnoughtus, I'd say Dreadnoughtus would actually be heavier, whereas Saltosaurus would actually be a little bit lighter in weight, but also be a lot more common. So, but also there could be a chance that maybe Dreadnoughtus is an adult form of Saltosaurus, but we surely don't know. But you see, some of the Saltosaurus specimens that I've actually have gotten to see pictures of, they actually show scutes, like bony, like bone in the skin, basically in the skin to actually help protect itself from predators, basically on the back, and that's where it is actually going to be at. And that considers to me that it's actually an adult. Whereas when you look at Dreadnoughtus, it doesn't have those features yet, unless if there's still a lot more to be found in terms of where Dreadnoughtus was actually found. That it could have actually had bony plates on it in its skin. It could have actually had them, but we still don't know. And also sauropod skin is very rare, and usually the sauropod skin that we actually do get to have is basically from Alcomahuevo, which is the site where it's actually a handful of a large area where sauropods actually nested. And what we get sometimes in these eggshells is impressions of embryonic skin, embryo skin of the sauropod. And now, embryo skin is very different from an adult. And because you see, baby skin in terms of a dinosaur, and it's basically the same thing in other animals as well. It's very thin. and also they're vulnerable to predation, and so it's a lot easier to kill. So basically predators, what they actually kind of do, it's a lot easier to kill a baby than it is to an adult, because an adult would fight back, whereas a juvenile would not have been able to fight back, and that kind of and so. But Dreadnoughtus is kind of that dinosaur where we still have a lot more to learn about, and also don't believe in what the press is really saying, because that is really kind of putting things out of context, and also they like to put words in everybody's mouth to actually say that this is the biggest. And we're still getting more dinosaur discoveries out there, and that's a good thing, because now we actually get to see what these dinosaurs might have been like, and also how they might have behaved. And of course, the extinction of Dreadnoughtus is still up for debate, and also it's still unknown. And so, considering that it was actually around 77 million years ago, excuse me, that it was actually probably just due to climate. Climate changed, plants changed, and also the animals have changed. And also, predators probably have gotten bigger, and also probably a little bit harder to actually give them a distraction, considering that they might be tougher and all that. So we really don't know how this actually might have actually been, but mainly climate and plants probably actually the climate changed, and also the plants have changed, pretty much probably caused the extinction of Dreadnoughtus. Anyway, that's it for now. Next week would actually be an answering questions episode, so if you got a question about dinosaurs or other prehistoric life, feel free to email me at dinochris71@gmail.com, or otherwise you can post the questions on Facebook, Prehistoric Facts with Dino Chris, in the comments section on any Facebook post. And that way it's a lot easier for me to read, and that so and so. And you can also follow me on Twitter at CSGRALL, and also make sure to take care of the people around you. And also for you younger people out there, make sure to listen to your parents, your teachers, and your guardians. It's the best motivation you can have for a good education. It's very important to have a good education. With a good education, you get a good job in the future. Alright, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys next week.